What's going on, gamer? So I laughed when I saw the title of this. Not that it's bad that this could happen, but just the fact that I think we know. Um, right here, we stand ready. Retro specialist Nightdive Studio says it wants to start and say remake, remastering 360 and PS3 games. Now, I think this would be good for games that you can't mess around with the sliders, you can't move out of anything, and this you'd be able to max them out, maybe even move them to a new engine specifically, because we've seen this happen before. But when it comes to Sony, we know the PS3 games kind of got shafted a bit, and this has always been a big thing that people were talking about. Because there's also a video that I found with this one guy playing PS3 games on a PS5 hardware dev kit, but it was weaker than the PlayStation 5 dev kit. Like, not just a little bit, like 5%. No, like 20, 25% weaker. And he was still able to get the games running at 4K 60, no problem. So we know this could happen. Now, here, um, honestly, I think Microsoft would have a better category than Sony when it comes to, that generation. But uh, now we got somebody, and some people were worrying too as well, guys. If this was, why do you tweet this on April Fools, right? And I've done some digging around, and apparently this seems to be very plausible. So, um, yeah, let's get into this. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what y'all think. So let's go over to the article here. We stand ready. Nightdive says it wants to start remastering Xbox 360 and PS3 era games. The studio CEO says he's confident it can handle PS3 remasters despite its system architecture. Yeah, of course, because they were kind of over exaggerating that for a little bit. And then, like I said, when I found that one video, I think it was some silicone video or whatever. I'd have to Google. Let's see, PS3 games on silicone. Here it is. I ran PS3 games on PlayStation 5 silicone to prove Sony wrong. This is the video I'm
This
talking about
right
right
here
here.
is probably one of the strangest pieces of computer hardware that I own. It looks kind of like a graphics card. It has a fan duct tape to the end of it, and it gets its power from an 8-pin PCIe power connector. It's not until you look just a little bit closer and notice the full complement of USB ports, DisplayPort, Ethernet, and an internal NVMe slot that you realize this thing just looks like an ordinary PC. But dig inside just a little bit further, and there's nothing very ordinary about it at all. As it turns out, under this heatsink lies the exact same silicon as you would find in a regular launch model PlayStation 5, complete with 16GB of GDDR6 memory, and as far as I know, I'm the only one that's been able to play games on it using modern Linux. And the story behind why this thing exists and why you can buy them for basically nothing right now is nothing short of fascinating. You see, AMD makes a lot of CPUs and SoCs, and you're probably aware that Sony is a pretty large customer of theirs. The problem is yields aren't always perfect when you're manufacturing millions of chips a year, and some of these CPUs that are made for the console manufacturers just don't work properly. Some of them have bad CPU cores that can lock up when running code, or they might have broken GPUs, so they're no good for playing games. And any of these chips that end up having too many defects are basically worthless because Sony isn't going to start selling PS5s with broken CPU cores. Now, if only there was a group of people buying up just about every single GPU on the market that we could sell these otherwise worthless APUs to, is what ASRock said when they apparently saw the conundrum AMD had been caught up in, and in turn, the two companies made this beautiful piece of engineering.
So keep in mind too, these are like downclocked. They don't have the same firmware and optimization as a PS5. They're weaker. You won't even be able to use, full power on any of the aspects on here. This is what I want to kind of show you guys. And even with that, he was able to still run PS3 games maxed out.
AMD BC250 Bitcoin mining rack. And just one of these racks contains a total of 12 BC250 blades, with each blade holding the PS5 SoC and 16GB of RAM, as I mentioned earlier, with a couple of compromises. The biggest of which is the fact that 2 CPU cores have been disabled per blade, leaving us with 6 CPU cores and 12 threads, and out of the 32 GPU compute units on the die, only 24 of them are enabled, which scales down performance by quite a bit. Windows won't boot properly on it, and pretty much every Linux distribution you try to run will either fall back to software rendering or just lock up the entire system during boot, so you can't really do much with these blades out of the box. But
And that's
I needed to
just to
show
show you
something
guys
related
something.
to PS3, so I went ahead and grabbed a copy of RPCS3. The rationale here is that in the past, Sony, and therefore many self proclaimed experts, have stated that PS3 emulation is simply not possible on the PS5, as it's just too computationally expensive. And obviously, that's just corpo speak for we can't make money if you don't buy new games, but I need an excuse to show this off anyway. Gran Turismo 5 Prologue is hands down my favorite entry in the Gran Turismo series, and I've tested it quite a few times over the years on RPCS3, so I have to admit, watching it run this well is just a testament to the incredible amount of effort that has been put into improving this emulator. Everything ran fine at 60 frames a second, with only the occasional shader glitch here and there, but it was a lot better than I expected. And just for fun, I cranked up the resolution to 1440p, which still maintains somewhat playable frame rates. One thing I noticed at this point was that for whatever reason, the AMD GPU driver only sees a single memory clock state that can be applied to this GPU, which is a measly 400 MHz. Since the memory clock isn't scaling under load, but the core clock is, I'm going to assume that this is some kind of hard-coded BIOS limitation.
So you guys saw that he's running it at 1440p, almost 60 frames with a down clock 450 megahertz. That's way weaker. Weaker CPU and weaker RAM because they can't run it in full capacity, and he's still managing to do that. So this could have been easily given to you guys on the PS3 world. I mean, the PS5 world. Running all those games at 1440p 60. Games that were like 720p 30 and all that. They could have done it. Let's go to this article. The studio CEO says he's confident it can handle PS3 remaster despite its system architecture. He said he was confident because it's not that hard. It's ready and willing to start remastering these games right away. Nightdive specializes in taking retro, polygonal games that are no longer easily playable on modern hardware and releasing HD remasters on PC and consoles. Recent releases have included The Thing, Turok Trilogy, Shock, Forsaken, Doom 64, Quake, Quake 2, Shadow Man, Blade Runner. As you see right here, Star Wars, The Dark Wars, PO'd Rise of the Triad. So for the most part, the studio focuses on games that originally had PC versions, then ports them to modern systems using its proprietary KEX engine, which is smart. Do it on PC first and you just scale it down. However, in a recent discussion with Video Game Chronicles, Nightdive Studio head Stephen Kick and Director of Business Development Larry Cooperman said that they were keen to start looking at potential remaster games that were only released on 360 or PS3. We stand ready, Cooperman said. When asked how they would handle each game given how many studios from the eras have closed down, he did note that there were numerous aspects to take into account. I would begin asking a couple of questions, he explained. Was it 360 exclusive or was there a PC version out too? Because that also changes things. The little preservation that's available, do we have source code? If so, what's the quality of the source code? How about the assets? Those are the kinds of considerations that we have. That being said, there were some really good games that came out in that era that shouldn't be lost. Kick at it. To your point, though, with a game like Haze, let's say, hypothetically, we had access to that, and there was our big title for 2028, right? We should go to the original designers, and we would say it didn't do as well as you had hoped. I'm sure you had a lot of time to ruminate and to think about what you would have done differently. We have had these discussions before with original developers or some of these games, and we've given them an opportunity to come back and say, this is what I would have done in the case of System Shock 2 Remastered. And a lot of these other games that we've been looking at, as soon as you bring them over and port them onto newer hardware, some of the problems start to clear themselves up, like frame rate, refresh rate, texture resolution, streaming, loading times. I know what I mean, because that's not really so much a bug, it's just hardware limitations, so it can't go past. Specifically regarding the PS3, VGC asked if the console's unique system architecture can only make it more difficult to remaster games that were exclusive to Sony's third console. Kick replied that it would be a challenge, but he was confident Nightdive could get the job done. Yeah, definitely, he replied. I think the architecture, I rember the talk that the system was first released of how difficult it was for developers to get it, and that's a big problem with backwards compatibility. This is a little bit of a different thing, but when it comes to PS3 first came out, it was backwards compatibility with PS2. And after a while, they were like, well, it's really expensive because we're literally putting in the hardware for both systems in order for that to happen. Again, there wasn't an elegant solution where the PS3 hardware could run PS2 games. It was just not compatible. So yeah, if we get to that, or I should say when we get to the PS3 era games, it will be a challenge that we have to face, but I think we've had enough experience to where we could do a serviceable job on a PS3 remaster. And they don't even have the intels that Sony would have for that. Cooperman added, the other part is the advantage of having our own engine, and that's a really big part of the Nightdive story. See, that's what I mean. If you have your own engine, it makes things better because you can just put all those games on your engine. There are things that we can do because we have our own engine. So I'm going to guess that we can go down that road, that Sam might figure out something that he could do with the KEX. Elsewhere in the discussion with BGC, Kick, and Cooperman said that they were optimistic that one day the studio could remaster classic shooter The Operative No One Lives Forever, despite the recent closure of its development, or the developer Monolith Productions, as we know. That was a bummer that they had to go down. So there we have it right there, guys. We know that this could happen. This is not April Fool's, though it was dropped in there, which I think is funny. And if it is, it would be crazy if it is. But going over here, if you go to Google and just type in PS3 only games, you could see what Sony had down here, right? Some of the things that I wish they would touch on is the Infamous series. They kind of left it idle for a while. You know what I mean? They've done nothing with the Killzone. Obviously, they didn't do anything with Resistance over here as well, right? Heavenly Sword, eh? But they don't have a whole bunch of games, but that they can touch. I mean, they could have done Killzone remasters instead of Concord, or like remakes or something, right? We know that they have the Soulcom series that they haven't touched in a while, right? Little Bit Planet is done. So is the developers of Heavy Rain, Aquatic Dreams, as I've explained what happened to them before. MGS4, Kojima's gone. That's not going to happen. Everybody's Golf, we know what's happening with that. That's not multi-platform. Um, Twisted Metal, well, that's a bummer, right? Because that had its potentials. So they didn't do anything with that. They didn't do, well, Mag is gone. That studio's gone with Planet Side and all that too. So they can't do much with that. But as far as like third party exclusive, these are just games they've had on their consoles. I mean, there's definitely some games that can touch upon. So I heard about people talking about Warhawk as well before. But I don't know. This is the game they're talking about. Sony actually published that too, which is interesting. I don't know what they plan to do with that, or maybe some other games too. GT, they don't really need to do anything much with that. The series is still doing well, but these are just the only games that were only on PS3 that I highlighted, so that's why I kind of had to just pull this up for you guys. But like I said, there's some games they definitely could touch upon, but they're just not doing it. Then there's games that were probably only in Japan as well. Then you got like 360 only games as well. Microsoft had a little bit more games than them. They can go into there. We know there's some really good games in there. A series that I really would like for them to touch is Condemned. And I know you guys know about that. It's like, come on, man, where's Condemned at? And why is that not up here? Maybe there's some games that may be missing, but the Condemned series is so good, man. I would like to see them do that. But let me know what you guys would like to see being remastered. As we know, Sony's very big on that right now, or even remade just outside of this. But yeah, you guys have it. Like I said, you want to take a look at this again, just come to I ran PS3 games on PS5 Silicon, and it'll come up and you'll get this video.
And we're probably leaving a lot of performance on the table. Performance that I unfortunately do not know how to get. So I tested some GPU benchmarks, and we were really only seeing numbers comparable to an RX 480, which is a far cry from the RX 6700 that the PS5 SoC supposedly shares a lot in common with.
That's how much weaker that was, and it still was running that good. So do you think that this is really a problem? It's not. You got your answers here. I gave it to you again. Once again, showing you all these different angles. Let me know what y'all think again. All right, y'all. Peace out.